We're continuing session 62 in the Gospel of Mark. We left off at Mark 15 4, where Pilate again asks Jesus, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you," which I think sounds quite historical. This amazement of Pilate is one of many amazements in this gospel. So notice that they're accusing him of many things, which again, I said Luke spells out into political and tax type charges. And notice there is no dialogue about Pilate's exousia given to him from above. That's in the Gospel of John, a very theological series of statements in the Gospel of John. We're not going to try to cover, that much. And so you have, I think, for sure, Pilate was known to crucify you without trial, but I have no reason to deny that Jesus appeared before Pilate with a series of interrogations, interrogatio, no, in Roman law, etc. Maybe some minimum observance of Roman law. But again, we get into something very interesting. He talks about a feast where they released a prisoner as a custom. And as I recall, there is no evidence for this feast or for this custom, rather. The Talmud, I think, refers to this, but I think based on the Gospels. But it's very interesting that all four Gospels have this account, so that according to exegetical rules, attestation or four different witnesses to the same thing is grounds for probability of historicity. But these things have to be taken, I think, with flexibility and discernment. I talked about this again, but I'll repeat it. This particular individual that's going to be freed happens to have the name Barabbas, son of the father. So, and he definitely has committed murder in an insurrection, revolt. So he's truly a political threat. And I think what the theological message here is, he is a false son of God. Jesus is a true one. And Barabbas is a true insurrectionist, and Jesus is a falsely accused one. So that you have, again, this presentation of Pilate as, sort of a reluctant, timid guy, the most unhistorical, presentation of Pilate you could have. I can refer you to the column on Pilate by Joseph Fitzmyer, a great Jesuit scholar and one of the editors of the New Jerome Biblical Commentary. In one column, he's got it all there, inscriptions and all the evidence about Pilate and this delegation that Philo, I think, was involved in. They removed him for being too cruel. So he was very, very cruel. And for him to be asking, the people what they want, and he perceives that it's out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up, but the chief priests stirred up the crowds to have him released for them Barabbas instead. So this is what I was saying about the fact that that the people were in favor of Jesus, and you can distill enough history from this to conclude that it's the chief priests who are in cahoots with the Romans. I understand that Pilate kept the high priest's garments so that he couldn't officiate without an explicit approval from Pilate. And he releases Barabbas in this very strange custom that is being referred to here. Then Pilate consults the people and says, "What shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" So if the people were really calling him the King of the Jews, they are, they welcomed him into Jerusalem on that purebred jackass messianic entry, Zechariah 9, Genesis 49, and in John definitely highlighting the messianic king aspects, Mark downplaying them tremendously. The kingdom of our father David, twice removed type of thing. And so the people cry out, "Crucify him." And then Pilate is again reluctant. Why? What evil has he done? And so they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, which he had no other record of him ever having done that. Not when he entered Jerusalem, where the Jews actually bared their necks and said, "Cut us off, you can't come in here with those emblems, with idolatrous images on them." So this is the one time that Pilate was, So this is a theological presentation with, unfortunately, with very bad consequences when biblical studies are not engaged in, and people don't think, and they think that it's the Jews against Jesus, which is very, very, wrong and tragic. So that it does mention that they scourged Jesus, which is part of the custom when you're condemned to crucifixion. They would scourge you first, unlimited in the Roman custom. I've talked about this before. In the Jewish legislation, it's 40 lashes. They would, subtract one so as not to pass over the limit. Paul talks about these 40 lashes, I think, in 2 Corinthians. And this would be the fence around the Torah that the rabbis speak about in Pirkei Avot, the chapters of the fathers in the Mishnah edition. You build a fence around the Torah so that you don't come close to violating Torah. And so this is, you don't have to make this up. The soldiers would play with you and ridicule you. And here you have the purple cloak, purple being expensive dye, crown of thorns, very, very heavy. I don't know whether they did that all the time, but I don't have any trouble believing they put a crown of thorns on Jesus and began to, mock him. And, striking his head and all this ridicule. And I think Mark very soberly conveys that. And I also think this is very historical, this reminiscence of a Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. I don't recall it. I think they mentioned Rufus in one of these Pauline letters or something. I'm sorry, I don't remember that so well. But apparently these were known people in the Markan community, maybe in Rome. In John, of course, Jesus carries his own cross. Thank you very much. But here he's having trouble. It would be the cross being, not the whole cross. The vertical pole or tree would be in the place of crucifixion. They bring him to Golgotha, place of the skull, Calvary. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, which was customary, but he did not take it. They divided his garments, clothes being, expensive and not something you throw away. They cast lots. There's none of this elaborate language as in John, where Psalm 22 does talk about casting, lots for my garments. But in John, you have this seamless vestment of the high priest described in Exodus for the high priest vestments, where you couldn't tear it, and the soldiers decided not to tear it. So you have in John a high priest clothing language. Mark doesn't get into any of that stuff. And so you have the third hour when they crucified him, and there's an inscription, or the titulus. The charge against Jesus is King of the Jews. And they crucified two, Roberts. They translate here robbers. These would be the lestai, the insurrectionist, highwayman, bandits that they've turned, the house of God into a cave of these kinds of people. And this is the word Josephus likes to use to refer to the Jewish insurgents who started the Roman war, or the war against Rome in 66. So that, Jesus wasn't the only one crucified that day, but apparently he's in the center. And they're mocking him as they pass by. And again, I mentioned this. They are saying, you who are destroying the temple and building in 3 days. So this, I think it's Perrin or maybe Donahue, when I did my dissertation, they are pointing to the present participle use. Then and there, he was accused of going to do that in the false witness episode before the Sanhedrin. Here, it's taking place then and there. You save yourself and come down from the cross, so that you have this language. In Matthew, it's going to be very explicit. If you are the Son of God, which is very, right from Wisdom chapters 2 and 3, the righteous sufferer, the pious servant or child, or huios theou, Son of God, in the book of Wisdom, is mocked along the same way. So in Matthew, being a very Jewish gospel, to be quoting from a Greek book of wisdom shows that the canon, certainly the third part of the Jewish canon, the writings, was definitely in flux until probably about 100 of the Common Era AD. But here it's very simple: save yourself. I know that the community of Sant'Egidio in Rome emphasizes that the only one who did not try to save himself was Jesus. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, now they switch here to the King of Israel instead of King of the Jews, come down from the cross, that we may see and believe. Sounds almost like John. And those who were crucified with him also reviled him. There is no good thief in this scene here. I just want to again point out these differences between these four, in a way, movies, presentations of Jesus. God is speaking to us, revealing to us through human means, using art. Art is not an inferior way of communicating. It's been defined as the depiction or representation of the infinite in something finite. And so I think that that would help so much in biblical studies, to have a notion that it's not all, New York Times or Times of London or whatever news you like as the facts. This is spiritual realities being transmitted in human form using all the gamut of human creativity. So the 6th hour comes, and there's darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And we talked about this before, and I want to repeat it again. This is the darkness at noon that, again, our friend Amos talks about in chapter 8, after the 4th vision of the overripe. By the way, very interesting, overripe fruit, which you might even say they're figs. Jeremiah talks about rotten figs. So this overripe fruit is Amos's language for the northern kingdom of Israel that's going to disappear. 40 years later, by the way, it's another 40, like 40-year prediction of something in the future that comes through in Amos, and Jesus predicts not a stone upon a stone 40 years before 70 A.D., around the year 29 or 30. So Amos 8 says in verse 9, it will happen on that day, by Yom Hahu, that eschatological day, oracle of the Lord Yahweh, Adoni, he always likes to call, the Lord Adoni. I will make the sun set at noon, and in the full light of day, I will cover the earth with darkness. I will change your Hagehem, your pilgrimage feasts, which the first one would be Passover, in mourning, and all your songs into elegies or mourning songs. I will put sackcloth on all loins, and all the heads will be tonsured or shaved, and I will make a lament as for an only son, and their end as a bitter day. So here you have in this little line, there was darkness over the whole earth or land until the 9th hour. Got a whole hyperlink to Amos. Incredibly heavy. There's also firstborn language in Zechariah. They will look on him whom they pierced, etc. John gets into that. I'm not going to get into that. I don't see any piercing here in Mark. The bystanders think he's calling Elijah. Now, Jesus cried out, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani. And the scholars, I think, have pointed out, they think this is probably an Aramaic instead of the Matthew version in Hebrew, Eli, Eli. Now, if you say Eli, Eli, you might be calling Elijah, but here it would be much more difficult to confuse what Jesus is saying in Aramaic with Elijah, which I said what might be another instance of lack of knowledge of the scriptures. Elijah has already come. But in any case, Elijah, of course, associated with the coming of the Messiah. Jesus in chapter 9 of Mark has said Elijah has already come, which it's understood it's John the Baptist. That's explicit in the Matthew 17 version of that. And then they put this reed to his mouth with sour wine, saying, let's wait to see if Elijah will come. Of course, in John, it's a hyssop, a floppy plant, reminiscent of the plant used to sprinkle blood on the doorposts for the Exodus in Exodus chapter 12, etc. And then you have Jesus uttering a loud cry and breathing his last. And this loud cry some have associated with a loud cry of the eschaton, and he expired. He doesn't deliver his spirit as in, or the spirit as in John. But we're going to have to stop there until next time.